Imagine earning the highest mark of honor your country can bestow, a symbol of, extreme sacrifice and merit. Now imagine watching that priceless symbol turn almost overnight into nothing more than a cheap receipt you can swap for a handful of grain.
We are diving deep into the ultimate paradox of institutional credit. I mean, this is the moment honor itself becomes a fungible, volatile commodity. We're tracking the history of the official ranks and titles of the Steen and Han dynasties, exploring how the currency of prestige just completely collapsed.
Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to treat these ranks, which were granted for everything from battlefield prowess to donating food during a famine, not just as historical footnotes, but as a meticulously managed non-monetary asset. And we're going to witness the hyperinflation that destroyed it.
Exactly. We'll see the system move from the absolute ironclad scarcity of the early Qin meritocracy through a period of necessary but frankly catastrophic military rewarding under Liu, and ultimately to a state-sanctioned fire sale that dismantled the early empire's most crucial non-financial credit system. Let's unpack this institution's rise and fall.
Okay, so before the glorious, long-lasting Han Dynasty, there was the Qin. It's famous for its short life and, well, terrifying efficiency. And the entire foundation of Qin governance, which was established by the great reformer Xiangyang in the 3rd century BCE, really rested on this hierarchy of ranks.
Right. Xiangyang understood that the traditional aristocracy was inefficient, it was unreliable. He needed a social structure that tied personal advancement directly to state goals, specifically military conquest and food production. The rank system was his brilliant, if brutal solution. It was the gold standard of social mobility. The only way up was through service.
And when we say currency, we really mean it. It had an absolute quantifiable value. This wasn't just a certificate of congratulations, was it?
Oh, not at all. Your rank determined your tax exemptions, the amount of land you were entitled to farm, the size of your retinue, even the quality of clothing you could wear, and crucially, your standing in any legal dispute.
So it touched every part of your life.
Every single part. And the state controlled the supply of these titles with meticulous care. For example, just the first rank granted certain tax remissions and allowed a man to be relieved of specific labor duties. But the real institutional power, the thing everyone was striving for, began around the 5th rank, the Dafu. That was the key threshold.
Why was the Dafu so critical under the Qin? What made that rank the one to get?
Because that was the level that truly lifted you above the common masses. Achieving the 5th rank meant you were entitled to a specific amount of public land, a huge benefit in a land-hungry empire, and it often dictated whether you could hold a mid-level administrative post. It was, the entry ticket to the true elite, the non-noble official class.
So the state essentially created this entirely new asset class, guaranteed its value, and then strictly limited its supply. How exactly did one acquire this wealth of prestige?
Primarily through bloodshed. The core mechanism was military meritocracy, and it was designed to make advancement arduous. For an ordinary soldier to gain even the 1st rank, they often had to provide proof of verified battlefield success. Historically, this meant presenting the severed head of an enemy soldier in combat.
Wow. Okay, so that sets a pretty high bar.
It does. It ensured stable value for generations, and that system of absolute credit and debt was ruthlessly balanced. You had to earn your way up by severe sacrifice, but you could also lose it just as fast. We have clear records showing that ranks could be forfeited to atone for serious legal transgressions.
So if you messed up, the state didn't just fine you in money, they demanded payment in prestige.
Exactly. It's the ultimate example of scarcity creating value. If you make it incredibly difficult, dangerous, and conditional to achieve a medal, that medal means everything. The moment you start handing them out at parade grounds, they become meaningless. The Qin understood that. They knew the value proposition of meritocracy was tied directly to its scarcity.
And the rarity of granting ranks outside of the battlefield really proves how religiously the Qin adhered to this system, doesn't it? In the century and a half between Xiangyang's reforms and the dynasty's collapse, we only find, 4 major recorded instances where ranks were granted for civic deeds instead of military violence.
That's right. And those civic duties were not easy handouts. They were equivalent to extreme military sacrifice. You can consider the period after the conquest of Anye, the former capital of the state of Wei. The Qing government didn't just award a rank, they offered it to civilians who were willing to uproot their lives from secure inland regions and resettle on the newly conquered, highly volatile front lines.
So they were basically asking them to be human shields against counterattacks.
Pretty much. And that immense civic and personal risk earned them 1 rank. It demonstrates institutional honesty, right? The reward was equal to the perceived difficulty. We see this again during the Chongping campaign, one of the most resource-draining conflicts in Chinese history.
Right. They were facing a severe manpower crisis.
A huge one. So the government granted one rank to all residents of Haine Commandery, but, and this is the key part, they immediately followed that with the conscription of 15-year-old boys into service.
So you got the reward, but you were simultaneously called upon to fulfill an equally arduous duty.
Exactly. It ensured the system was never abused to simply inflate the social standing of non-contributors.
But let's get specific on the cost. How exclusive was this system financially? We have a stunning benchmark from 243 BCE when the empire faced a crisis of locusts and epidemics. The state offered an alternative path to a rank, right, open to civilians through donation.
Yes, and this is where the price of honor is etched into the historical record. A civilian could gain a single rank by donating 1,000 sheaf of grain. And to grasp the scale, that is approximately 13,500 kilograms of processed grain.
13,500 kilograms. I mean, that number sounds huge, but how does it relate to the common person? What does that really mean?
It means it put the rank completely out of reach for, I'd say, 99% of the population. Even if we use peacetime grain prices, which fluctuated around 50 to 60 copper coins per sheaf, that first rank cost between 50,000 and 60,000 copper coins.
50 to 60,000 coins.
Mm-hmm. And to put that in perspective, an ordinary laborer or peasant might earn less than 1,000 coins in an entire year.
So this one rank, the absolute entry level of prestige, cost 50 or 60 times the average annual income.
Precisely. It functioned as an absolute wealth tax on the ultra-rich. It allowed them to participate in the meritocracy, but at a punishing financial price that ensured the exclusivity remained intact. This benchmark established the non-negotiable worth of the title system in the public consciousness.
So the genius of the Qin was carving this scarcity, this incredible honor, into public memory. Even when the Qin dynasty fell and the government changed, the Han emperors inherited a public that fundamentally believed these ranks were worth gold and required blood.
And that deeply ingrained institutional credit was the very thing they would immediately use and subsequently abuse in the scramble to consolidate power after the war.
So the collapse wasn't a slow erosion. It was an acute institutional shock event. And it was triggered by the founder of the Han Dynasty, Emperor Gaozu, Liu Bang.
Liu Bang was desperate. I mean, during the Chu-Han contention, he was frequently militarily disadvantaged against his rival, Shan Yu. He needed to motivate armies of unprecedented size, and really the only currency he had available was future prestige. He offered increasingly generous rewards and promises to keep his troops in the field.
And it's important to note his administrative choice here.
Yeah.
Early in the conflict, he had used Chu's rank system, but upon occupying the crucial region of Guangzhou, which was the heartland of the old Qin Empire, he immediately switched back to the Qin model.
Yeah, and that tells us a crucial fact about institutional history. Even in the chaos of civil war, the Qin's rigid 20-rank system was recognized as the superior organizational and motivational tool. So Liu Bang adopted the best structure, but then immediately overloaded it with impossible debt.
And the moment of institutional crisis arrived in 22 BCE. Liu Bang had defeated Xiang Yu, he'd unified the realm, and now he had to pay his debt. He had to pay the 600,000 or so troops who had won him the empire, so he issued the Catastrophic Edict.
This is it. This is the definitive moment of devaluation. Edict declared, I'm paraphrasing here, all military personnel who have not yet reached the rank of Dafu the 5th rank shall be promoted to Dafu, and those already at or above Dafu shall advance 1 rank.
Okay, well, let's just pause and absorb the magnitude of that. We established that the 5th rank, Dafu, was the crucial gatekeeper, the massive threshold that required decades of service or exceptional wealth to cross under the Qin. Now, Liu Bang declared it the minimum starting line for every single Han veteran who had served in his war machine.
The value of that rank instantly dropped to 0. I mean, if every private, every laborer conscripted, every supporting auxiliary now held the Dafu, that title no longer guaranteed you social status or tax benefits or access to administrative posts. It simply became the mandatory stamp of a demobilized soldier.
It's like a modern inflationary shock, right?
Yeah.
A quantitative jump in credentialism that just dilutes the currency of merit. If a master's degree previously symbolized elite knowledge and access, and then everyone in the country is given a master's degree overnight, the value collapses, and the market instantly searches for a new, higher baseline of achievement.
Precisely. And the immediate localized fallout was chaos. Liu Bang, remembering the prestige the ranks held in his youth, quickly realized local officials were ignoring his edict. He issued a furious decree noting that veterans with the 7th rank, the Gongdafu, and 8th rank, the Gongshum, which were once serious positions under Qin, were being blatantly disrespected.
He actually describes the veterans returning home with their high-status title certificates, only to be kept waiting by low-level county magistrates. They weren't offered a seat, they were snubbed, and they were told to come back later. And the emperor saw this as a personal affront to the honor he had bestowed.
He was right to see it as an affront to imperial authority, but the local officials had a powerful, pragmatic defense. They essentially told the emperor, "We understand the honor, Your Majesty, but we literally cannot afford the benefits those titles demand."
And this is the crux of the institutional failure. The titles weren't just names. They came with massive, legally binding financial requirements, land grants, and tax exemptions.
And the scale of the debt Liu incurred was just impossible to service. Conservative scholarly estimates suggest he commanded approximately 600,000 troops. To fully honor the land grants associated with their newly inflated ranks would have required 300 million mil of farmable land, plus an additional 15 million mil for residential plots.
300 million mu. To put that into perspective for us, 300 million mus is roughly 20 million hectares. What percentage of the early Han Empire's total cultivable land are we talking about here?
Well, the data is complex, but the estimated total cultivated land of the early Han state was certainly not enough to absorb that demand without catastrophic political failure. Fulfilling those grants would have meant dispossessing vast numbers of non-veterans or consuming every last reserve of public land. The local magistrates, who managed the physical tax rolls and land registry, they were the ones staring into the economic abyss.
So the local officials, the people on the ground, were forced to choose. They could either ignore the imperial edict and risk the emperor's wrath, or bankrupt their own administrative regions by fulfilling impossible land promises.
It was a political impossibility. Liu Bang had traded long-term solvency and institutional credit for short-term military victory. He had printed so much currency that the underlying gold, the land and tax revenue, simply didn't exist to back it up.
Yet despite this massive inflationary shock, Liu Bang did retain some semblance of reverence for the system, right? Maybe because he was so close in age to Qin Shi Huang and remembered the purity of the Qin system. He was careful not to grant titles outside of rewarding his war comrades and his immediate family.
Right, and that residual restraint acted as a fragile political barrier. But once the founder of the dynasty died, that barrier vanished instantly. And that paved the way for the full monetization of prestige.
The moment Liu Bang was gone, the focus shifted entirely from rewarding past merit to leveraging titles for immediate state revenue. The initial damage was done by his son, Emperor Eightwei, and his powerful mother, Empress Lu.
Under Empress Lu's regency, the dam just broke. Titles were explicitly put on the sales floor. It was a direct commercial transaction. They were sold for a shockingly low 2,000 copper coins per rank.
2,000 coins. Let's bring back our Qin benchmark just to illustrate the absolute collapse of credit here. Under Qin, one rank cost 50,000 to 60,000 copper coins, reflecting the immense sacrifice required.
And now, under Empress Lu, you could buy a rank for 2,000 coins. And worse, they offered the bundle deal. And this perfectly illustrates a complete loss of institutional integrity. 30 ranks, which should have cost over 1 million coins based on the Qin benchmark, could be purchased to commute a death sentence.
That is the moment the value of the rank became less than the value of survival. It wasn't just a devaluation, it was a catastrophic declaration that the state's honor system could be traded for pocket change to save a criminal's life.
The collapse was total. The state, facing endemic financial pressure stemming from that land crisis Liu Bang initiated, formalized this sales structure. And this policy was then brilliantly, or maybe disastrously, formalized under Emperor Wen, championed by his chief minister, Cao Cu.
Right, Cao Cu is the architect of turning state prestige into state profit. His argument was subtle, but it was entirely focused on immediate fiscal health. He argued that the court should reward and punish using grain to encourage agriculture.
The mechanism was simple. Civilians could exchange cheap, surplus grain for titles. This was an economic policy masquerading as a meritocratic one. The grain was used to fund the government's military and logistical needs without draining the central copper coin reserves.
So if we look at this through a modern lens, Cao Cu was basically arguing for a form of quantitative easing. The government needed liquid assets, in this case massive grain stores, to cover its operational deficits. So instead of printing paper money, they were printing titles. and injecting them into the economy in exchange for a desperately needed commodity.
It was abandoning the long-term institutional credit system for short-term financial liquidity. The ranks stopped being symbols of merit and became volatile commodities, subject only to the state's financial needs. This policy institutionalized the idea that prestige was for sale.
And what ranks were they selling? I mean, not just the low ones. They were selling truly high ranks cheaply. Emperor Wen was selling titles like Wu Fu, which was the 9th rank. Under Qin, the 9th rank was a serious position, often commanding field armies.
And this is where the historical context is crucial. They were even selling the Dashu Zhang, the 18th rank, a tremendously high honor. Why does this matter? Because the Dashu Zhang was positioned higher than the Daoyang Zhao, the 17th rank, which was the highest rank attained by legendary foundational figures of the Qin state like Shangyang and the great general Bai Qi.
So the rank that defined the careers of the empire's greatest military and administrative geniuses, the absolute peak of non-noble achievement, was now being undercut by titles being sold off to rich farmers exchanging cheap grain.
It just demonstrates the speed of the collapse. When the pinnacle achievements of your historical heroes are devalued and superseded by bought titles, the system has lost all meaning. It's no surprise that the great historian Sima Qian only mentioned his grandfather's rank as Wu Fu. It's heavily speculated that his grandfather purchased that rank during this specific fire sale era under Emperor Wen.
And this monetization also led to a critical administrative disaster. Emperor Wen sold the ranks, but he did not sell official administrative positions.
Right. And this severed the core institutional logic established by Qin, where your rank generally corresponded to your administrative role and social benefits. The Han bureaucracy now had to deal with two completely separate systems, the honorary ranks and the actual governmental posts.
And the resulting chaos is vividly captured in the surviving Han bamboo slips. We find records of common soldiers holding high honorary titles that bore absolutely no resemblance to their actual low-level administrative duties. The rigid, merit-based structure was just replaced by utter confusion.
The system became functionally schizophrenic. I mean, how could a county magistrate enforce discipline on a local person who held a rank technically superior to the magistrate's own, even if that person was just a retired peasant? It eroded local governance and trust.
So by the time Emperor Wu, the famous martial emperor, arrived, the market for titles was just completely saturated. There was no institutional appetite left.
That's right. Title sales collapsed as a reliable revenue stream because the public realized they were buying worthless paper. Attempts by the court to resell them met with very little interest. And on top of that, a black market emerged where soldiers, desperate for cash, tried to sell their hard-earned ranks back to other citizens.
Just imagine that. Earning prestige through years of combat, only to find that rank was completely illiquid when you needed to feed your family. That would have created deep social instability and resentment among the military class.
Absolutely. So, recognizing the total worthlessness of the old system, Emperor Wu attempted a desperate maneuver. He tried to fix the institutional collapse by creating a whole new currency of prestige, the Wugong Jie, or martial merit rank.
That is the ultimate example of a government trying to solve a crisis of confidence by printing a new, fancier version of the original failing currency, isn't it? It's like trying to fix fiat currency hyperinflation by introducing a gold-backed yuan note. It just added complexity and confusion to an already broken system.
Exactly. And the final stage of this collapse was just the sheer proliferation of grants for increasingly trivial, non-meritorious reasons. It just reduced the ranks to mere ceremonial footnotes.
The bar kept lowering, and the printing press never stopped. Universal one-rank grants became standard for simple, predictable events. A new emperor ascending, the crown prince being invested, or even just the crown prince's coming-of-age ceremony.
And Emperor Jing, who was Wu's predecessor, took this political inflation to an absurd extreme. He renamed his reign twice after solar eclipses, which were seen as terrible omens requiring immediate appeasement, and granted one rank each time. In his short reign, he issued 8 universal grants.
8 grants. Just think about the bureaucratic weight of that. The government was issuing 8 universal promotions in a single reign. Did the administration even have the capacity to process that many official changes, or were they just printing paper that everyone knew was worthless? And that volume of grants matched the combined total of his 4 predecessors, Liao Bang, Hui, Liu, and Wen.
Yeah, the institutional mandate was no longer about rewarding merit or managing debt. It was about managing omens, celebrating birthdays, and easing political transitions. The quantity completely overwhelmed the quality.
And the practice continued, unabated. Even later, Emperor Xuan issued 14 grants in 27 years. By the time of the Eastern Han, they were often granting 2 or 3 ranks per edict, whereas the Western Han typically stuck to 1.
The only institutional attempt at damage control came during the Eastern Han, and it was, really, a formal admission of failure. They finally imposed a ceiling. No grants beyond the 8th rank. If you were already at the 8th rank, you couldn't advance further. You could only transfer the grant.
So it was a final desperate move to prevent the entire 20-rank hierarchy from becoming completely inverted. But by then, the low ranks were ubiquitous and meaningless, the high ranks were unattainable or corrupted by purchases, and all the original tangible benefits, the land, the tax breaks, had vanished.
The ancient currency of prestige was officially dead. The titles had lost all function, serving neither as honorary accolades nor as functional administrative qualifications. They were merely empty symbols of a meritocracy that had self-destructed.
So we've completed our deep dive, charting the 3 acts of this institutional tragedy. Xiangyang's creation of absolute, non-negotiable credit. Liu Bang's necessary but massive inflationary shock to win the war. And the subsequent emperor's fatal decision to monetize that debt for short-term fiscal relief.
Right. The history of the Qin and Han titles isn't just about ancient Chinese ranks. It's a timeless lesson in institutional credit. Like later dynasties that collapsed by literally overprinting currency, the Han sacrificed its most precious non-monetary asset, the long-term integrity and honor of the state.
They prioritize immediate fiscal survival, getting a few bags of grain into the treasury or avoiding a few hundred death sentences, over maintaining the integrity of the system that guaranteed social order and motivated millions. They sold their institutional soul for a fraction of its true worth.
And when a government begins to sell its most sacred institutional symbols, its medals, its degrees, its judicial independence, or its legislative credit, it signals the absolute collapse of public trust. That trust, unlike copper coins or grain, is incredibly hard to replenish.
So if the greatest symbols of national honor can be sold for the equivalent cost of avoiding a minor tax audit, what is the real hidden cost when modern governments sacrifice institutional credibility in regulatory bodies, in universities, or in political processes simply to achieve a short-term political or budgetary fix? That loss of faith is the debt that history always collects. If you found this discussion useful, maybe learned something new, definitely hit that subscribe button. We do these deep dives regularly, exploring valuable ideas.
We appreciate you tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.